All the Young Dudes by MsKingBean89. Chapter 96, 6th year, September. Wednesday, 1st September 1976. This is the year, lads. This is the year it finally happens. 6 years of waiting, and it all pays off. You can't be talking about what I think you're talking about. Remus raised an eyebrow over the top of his book. Oh, yes. James was beaming like a drunkard. Lily Evans is definitely going to realise she's mad about me. I can feel it. Are you sure, though? Sirius smirked. You've had these feelings before. I have, James nodded respectfully. You're quite right, Padfoot, but something is different this time. I could practically taste it. Love is very much in the air. Or lust, Remus muttered, flipping his page over. You're probably just picking up on the raging hormones coming off these idiots. He nodded at Sirius and Peter, who both kept glancing out of the train window, looking for their respective girlfriends. Who are you calling an idiot, Mooney? Sirius retorted. I can't help it if I drive women wild with desire. Sirius bloody Black, I could kill you! Mary's furious shriek could have shattered glass. Sirius practically leapt 2 feet off his seat. Remus gave a satisfied nod. Wild with something, anyway. James guffawed, nearly choking on the Bertie Bott's every flavour bean he had been chewing. No one was happier about Remus and Sirius's reconciliation than James. He didn't say anything directly, but as soon as he recognised that his two best friends were no longer keeping each other at arm's length, he was grinning from ear to ear, back to his usual mischievous self, and therefore back to sighing over Lily Evans. Lily entered the carriage at this point, just behind Mary, who had burst in like a whirlwind. Lily smiled at Remus and took the spare seat beside him. He smiled back, and they settled in to watch the show. What have I done? Sirius asked, affronted. You really don't know, do you? Mary stood with her hands on her hips, a look of disgust on her face. She looked spectacular when she was angry. Her gold-hoop earrings jangled, her coal-rimmed eyes were wide and fiery. Diagon Alley? She stamped her foot. Sirius's eyes widened. Bugger. Fuck you, Black! Mary turned and stormed back out. Sirius scrambled up to follow her down the corridor, just as the train started moving. Oi, Mary, wait! I'm sorry! Remus turned to Lily. What did he do? Forgot her birthday, Lily grinned. Apparently, they had a plan to meet in Diagon Alley, and she waited for 2 hours. Oh, bollocks! James slapped his forehead. I was supposed to remind him. You're as bad as each other, Lily snorted. Codric saved a girl stupid enough to marry any of you. Has anyone seen Desdemona? Peter asked, distractedly. Lily shook her head, and the boys shrugged. Peter got up. I'll see you lot later, and wandered out of the carriage. Bloody hell, James said. What's happened to the marauders? Oi, I'm here, Remus said, returning to his book. My only true friend, James smiled. You'll never leave me, Fergil, will you, Mooney? No chance, Remus replied, turning the page again. Wait, Lily yelped, grabbing Remus's shoulder. That's why they call you Mooney. Remus gave her a sideways grin and nodded very slightly. Lily looked amazed. I can't believe I didn't work it out sooner. Hang on, James frowned. Worked what out? It's just an in-joke, right, Remus? Something stupid we came up with as kids. No big secret, Ernie. Prongs! Remus shook his head, laughing. It's fine, she knows. James's hazel eyes widened, and he stared at them both. Lily giggled, her eyes teasing, and Remus suddenly saw exactly why she drove James so crazy. You're an idiot, Potter, but at least you can keep your secret. Well, of course. James straightened his back and puffed out his chest. We'd all do anything for Mooney. Remus was really quite touched by that, and he had to raise his book to hide his face. He hoped Lily knew James was being quite honest, and not just showing off for her approval. The compartment door slid open, and Marlene entered. She'd had her hair cut into a neat bob over the summer, like Mia Farrow. It was very becoming. She smiled and nodded at her friends, sitting down next to James. Sirius and Mary are having a proper screaming match out there. It's mental. She looked at Lily. then James, then Remus. What have I missed? Mary forgave Sirius by the time they reached Hogwarts, on the promise that he would take her for a day in Hogsmeade to make up for it. Remus was pleased. He could honestly, truly say that without bitterness. He felt that Sirius had drawn a line under their kiss back in the Potter's bathroom, and it was up to him, Remus, to honour and respect that line. Sirius liked Mary. Remus would just have to get over it, that's all. And, yes, fine. Sometimes Remus fantasised about kissing the hollow of Sirius's collarbone, about tracing the line from the pit of his throat down to his navel. So what? That was purely Remus's problem. He'd have to focus his attentions elsewhere. Perhaps Christopher had become dazzlingly attractive over the summer. The feast and the sorting was as magnificent and reassuringly predictable as ever. The friends chatted about their new timetables. Lily was extremely disappointed to find out that Remus had chosen to drop potions, but he promised to keep giving her a run for her money and charms. Their summers tactfully avoided Mary's birthday, and the looming pressure of Newt's. All blissfully normal, Remus thought to himself, as they finished their puddings and got up, yawning, ready for bed. I'm knackered, James said, stretching. Early night tonight, eh, Marlene? Practice first thing. Oh, no you don't, Potter. You're coming with me, Lily said, sternly. He blinked, as if he couldn't believe his luck. She frowned. We've got to lead the first years to bed. Have you already forgotten you're a prefect? Oh, shit, yeah. Bugger. Whoops. Lily tutted, getting up. We'll work on your language too. Come on. She looked at the others. Password's lion art. They thanked her and went on ahead, leaving James behind, looking confused but grateful. Sirius flung himself into the largest, comfiest couch in the common room, taking up enough space for 3 people. Mary joined him with an indulgent smile, settling her little feet across his legs. Peter and Marlene started a game of chess on the carpet in front of the fire, and Remus picked up his book. Everything is as it should be, he smiled, peacefully. A chapter in, Sirius evidently grew bored. When's our first party then? He asked the general room. Our first match is in November, Marlene said from the floor, her eyes on the game. You couldn't look away for a moment when you were playing Peter. No one knew how he did it. You can organise the victory party if you want, Black. That's ages away, Mary purred. Halloween? Close to your birthday. We can do it after the feast. Remus's stomach rumbled at the mention of a feast. He put down his book. Wonder if there's time to go down to the kitchens. You can't possibly be hungry, Sirius arched an eyebrow. You had 3 helpings of pudding. You're probably right, Remus sighed, and settled back into the armchair. He shifted sideways, dangling his long legs over the end, kicking off his dirty tennis shoes, and returned to his book. It was Dickens, The Pickwick Papers, and funny, but dry, so that he really had to focus in order to find the funny bits. Unfortunately, a full stomach, a long day, and a warm fireplace were not conducive to concentration, and Remus soon dozed off. It must have only been half an hour that had passed when Remus snapped awake to the sound of raucous laughter. Stay still, Potter. I'm trying. Remus blinked a few times, confused and groggy. He stared around to find Peter and Marlene rolling on the earth rug giggling, Mary standing next to Lily near the portrait hole, where James appeared to be performing a very complicated and vigorous Irish jig. Remus smiled sleepily and straightened up, his back sore from sleeping all folded up like a deck chair. He turned left, just to get the wrist in his neck to pop, and caught Sirius watching him with a soft, unconscious smile. Remus raised an eyebrow, which seemed to break the spell, and Sirius blinked, then looked away, quickly. What happened? Mary was asking, with hands on her hips. Silly Pratt was showing off, as per usual. His exit as suit of armour and backfired. Lily was half laughing, half trying to corner James for long enough to perform the counter-jinx. Who were you trying to X? Sirius stood up now, crossing the room. Bloody Mulciber, James said, a comical frown on his face as his legs flew about energetically beneath him. Petrificus totalis, Sirius said, with a yawn. James froze still and fell to the ground, stiff as a board. Black? Lily sighed. What? Sirius grinned. I was only trying to help. Remus giggled, still stretching. It was probably time for bed. He got up slowly as Sirius, Mary and Lily stood over James, arguing over which spell to break first, the dancing one or the petrifying one, and Sirius was in favour of simply levitating him up to bed as he was. Just as Remus was heading in the direction of the boys' dormitory, he caught sight of Christopher. The fifth-year boy was coming down the stairs with a shiny silver prefect's badge pinned proudly to his chest. Unfortunately, Christopher had not become incredibly good-looking over the summer. In fact, quite the opposite. He had obviously been somewhere very hot and sunny over the summer, and his pale English skin was scorched bright red and peeling grotesquely at his nose. They stared at each other for a moment, before Christopher looked at his feet, then walked away without a word. Remus felt this sting of guilt. He'd have to apologise, at some point. Wednesday, 8th September 1976. With your hours now behind you, and your newts over a year away, do not fall in the trap of believing that this will be an easy year. Your 6th year lays the foundations for your advanced exams, and the work you do will be pivotal in determining the opportunities available to you once you leave school. Remus fought not to yawn. He might have felt nervous, worried, spurred into action, and he had been. The first time he'd heard this speech. They were halfway through the first week of 6th year, and so far, every teacher had performed some variation on this address. This morning, the lecture was being given by Professor Flitwick, and therefore made mildly more interesting because of his squeaky little voice. Remus looked out of the window. It was the full moon tonight, and he was restless. He had a horrible feeling about it, as well as the usual early twinges and surges of adrenaline. It was the first full moon he would be spending with the Marauders since that terrible night in June. It was the first full moon after the werewolf attack in August, since he had run away from St. Edmunds. The murders played heavy on his mind. The family was called Monday. Both parents had been Muggle-born. It had been in the papers, and Remus had read everything he could while he was at the Potters. He'd searched high and low for mention of Greyback, for a picture, a description, anything. If this man was after him, then he needed to be armed with information. But there was nothing. The press wasn't publishing anything more than Moody had already told him. The letter to Ferrex had been written for almost a week now. It was burning a hole in Remus's back pocket. He'd been waiting to get a chance to sneak off to the Owlery on his own. Dear Professor Ferrex. He knew that Ferrex wasn't a professor anymore, but he didn't know what else to call him, and couldn't bring himself to address him as anything so familiar as Leo. I hope it's okay for me to write you. I had a few questions, and I couldn't think of anyone else who might know. I spoke to Alistair Moody while I was staying with the Potters this summer, and he said you're well. I hope you aren't anywhere too dangerous. Moody told me that the Monday family were murdered by Greyback. He said that Greyback might try to find me, and get me to join him. I hope you know I'd never join that side. I do want to be prepared if he comes after me, though. Can you tell me anything useful? I don't even know what he looks like. I'm sorry to bother you with this, but you're the only person I can ask, because you knew my dad, and you know me. Thank you, Remus J. Lupin. He knew that you were supposed to end letters, yours sincerely, or yours faithfully, or something like that, but it seemed so silly and formal. He worried that Ferrex might think he was trying too hard to seem grown up. Mooney, wakey wakey, Sirius shook his shoulder. What? Remus looked up, blinking and dazed. Sirius was standing over him, and everyone else was packing up their things. Lesson's over, Dopey. Where'd you wander off to? Just distracted, Remus replied. He stood up and scooped his own assortment of quills and parchment into his book bag, getting up. Sirius's face softened. He leaned in and said, very low, Is it because of tonight? Are you nervous? Remus gave a sort of half-shrug, half-reassuring smile. No more than usual. We've got our free now, Sirius said, chirpily. He was very much enjoying this new timetable, having dropped 4 subjects. Want to pop round the greenhouses? Nah, Remus grinned. It's okay. I have to go to the Owlery. Got a letter to post. Oh yeah? I'll come with you. James has another Poncy prefect meeting. I swear you never went to this many meetings. Nah, I sort of left it all up to Evans, to be honest, Remus smirked. Of course, I wasn't trying to impress her. Sirius laughed. Too bloody right. At least you know where your priorities are, Mooney. Who's the letter for? Do you mind not asking? Remus looked down as they left the classroom, walking with a slightly longer stride than usual so that Sirius would have to walk faster to keep up. It was a cheap trick, but there had to be some benefits to being tall. Oh, of course, mate, Sirius nodded, respectfully. Don't mind me, I'm just bored, you know. He had been extremely pliant lately, eager to supply Remus with any allowances he requested. Remus thought he could probably get away with snogging Mary on the Gryffindor dinner table with Sirius's blessing, the way things were. They tramped up to the Owlery quickly. With the moon waxing, Remus's energy levels were through the roof, then going single file up the final narrow winding staircase. The Owlery was a beautiful place, by anyone's standards, provided you ignore the smell of bird shit, with the very best view of anywhere else in the castle. It was a bright and airy space with high rafters, filled with the soft sounds of roosting owls. Sirius dutifully hung back a respectful distance as Remus selected the sturdiest looking owl. He had no idea where Ferrex was, rather far away, and wanted a bird that was up to the job. Attached his letter and released it through the huge picture window. Sirius was leaning out of the window on the opposite side, staring down at the forbidden forest. How far do you reckon we got last year? He asked. Couple of miles, at least. At least, Remus agreed, joining him at the windowsill. Think we could reach those mountains? They're caves, I bet. I used to quite fancy living in a cave, when I was little. Me and Reggie were going to run away from home and become cave dwellers. Weirdo, Remus shook his head. It'd be freezing. Yeah, well, you don't think about that stuff when you're 7, do you? I suppose. I never actually thought about running away, to be honest. Lots of boys actually did it, but the police normally brought them back. Matron used to say that if one of us went missing, there was no skin off her nose. She still got paid at the end of the week. Mooney, that's... Remus laughed and moved away. Come on, let's get out of here. I'm hungry. They began a slightly slower descent down the spiral staircase, but had to stop halfway as they heard footsteps coming up. Remus's stomach sank when he saw it was Christopher. He'd recovered a bit from his sunburn, but still had a bit of a hot glow around his cheeks and nose. He froze when he saw Sirius, with Remus just behind him. The two boys flattened themselves against the wall as best they could to let him pass. Hi, Chris, Remus smiled, politely. Hi, Christopher responded, not making eye contact. Ah, he was definitely still annoyed about the way Remus had spoken to him at the end of last term. Remus had been worried about this, but he supposed he deserved a bit of a cold shoulder. The silver pin gleamed on Chris's robes, and Remus tried not to wince. He could feel it in his teeth, a giddy, sick sensation. Well done on getting prefect, he said, trying to sound friendly and encouraging. Yeah, thanks, Christopher nodded. He still didn't look up exactly, but he sort of looked at the space over Remus's left shoulder and gave a weak smile as he passed. The close proximity to the silver was extremely unpleasant, and Remus's head swam, making him dizzy. As Christopher pushed past them both, Remus wobbled forward and had to grip Sirius's shoulder to keep him balanced. He had to concentrate on his breathing to avoid fainting altogether until Christopher had reached the Owlery and barely noticed that Sirius had slipped a strong arm around his back for support. When he opened his eyes and the wooziness had passed, Remus thought it must have only been a few seconds that they had stood like that, clinging to each other in the shadowy stairway. Must stop getting stuck in confined spaces with him, the logical part of Remus's brain scolded. He realised he had been gripping Sirius's shoulder really quite hard, and let go, quickly, stepping away and adjusting his robes. Sorry, he said. Took me by surprise. It's okay, Sirius smiled, turning and walking down the stairs again. Another reason to hate prefects, eh?